This is the Samsung S95B. This is my first impressions video where I'm going to go through the setup and what my thoughts are after the first couple of days of use. And I will be doing more videos on things like gaming and motion and sort of my full review, so do subscribe to see those. And also, if there's anything in particular that you want to see, stick it in the comments below. Let's have a look. The hype for this TV is unbelievable, and the reason for that is not only is it Samsung's first OLED, but it was really the first QD-OLED that was on the market. And other than the Sony A95K, this is the only QD-OLED TV that you can buy. It's meant to be brighter, it's meant to be more vivid with its colours, so this has the potential not only to be one of the best TVs this year, but one of the best jumps in TV technology that you might find. And while I am riding this sort of hype train with how good this TV is meant to be, let's just be clear on one thing. At this level, the differences in TVs aren't really that big. But despite that, each TV does have its own things it can do very well, and does have its things that it might struggle on. And from my first impressions, the S95B is no different. But first of all, what is QD-OLED? So the reason why this can apparently get brighter and be much more color saturated is because it uses a very different technology. Essentially, it has its OLED pixels, and then the quantum dot layer, that is what handles the color. So instead of doing what a regular OLED would do, which is have the subpixels green, blue and red and then a white subpixel, this just has the pixel and then the quantum dots handle the color. And this means we lose a lot less brightness in general, but also a lot less brightness over the colors. It means that your reds will be redder and your greens should be greener. Now, as with any new technology, there is going to be a question of how will this stack up in a few years' time? And there will be concerns about things like burn-in because no one's had a QD-OLED TV longer than a couple of months. So what will it look like in 3 years? At the moment, we just don't know. But that to one side, let's take a look at this TV. So the TV is available in two sizes. You can have a 55-inch or a 65-inch. I have the 55-inch purely because it's cheaper to be able to do these videos if I go for the smaller TV. Other than the size, there should really be no difference. Now you can mount this with a VESA mount, or you can put this on a stand, and actually the stand is quite nice. It's a little center mounting stand. It looks really smart, and you don't have to put any screws in to attach it to the TV. It's just got these cool little clip things, which that I'm a big fan of, especially if you're going to be going between the wall and the stand. It just makes it a lot easier. The TV also has some quite nice cable management. The covers that go over the back of the TV make it look a lot nicer, but it does limit the access to the ports, and you're gonna have to be taking it on and off if you're changing ports a lot, so do bear that in mind. Obviously you don't have to have the covers on if you don't want them on. The TV looks really nice. It's got a really thin panel, which is quite standard among most OLEDs. The bezel is again pretty much what you expect from most other TVs at this level, and I have heard rumours of quality control issues about potentially some of these TVs arriving slightly bent or something like that. I didn't have that issue at all, and actually most people I've spoken to haven't had that issue, so that's probably not a risk. And even if it did happen to you and you were buying this TV, just bear in mind that you could send it back and get a new one. I know that's not what you want to do, but it's unlikely that's going to happen. Now when it comes to the ports, the main impressive thing is that it has 4 HDMI 2.1 ports. Now that is very good for quite a few reasons really. HDMI 2.1 basically means you can connect something that can take advantage of the 4K 120Hz panel. For example, the latest generation consoles, that is what they use in order to get the highest frame rates. Now a lot of other 120Hz TVs actually only have 2 HDMI 2.1 ports. The exception is LG's C series OLEDs, they have 4. Now that, again, that doesn't really sound like much of an issue, but if you have a soundbar connected to your TV via the EOC port, that is going to be using one of those HDMI 2.1 ports. So that then gives you the space for another HDMI 2.1 device, like an Xbox Series S or a PS5, but if you have more than one of those, which some people do, then you're going to need the extra ports. So the fact that it has 4 has put it on par with the LGs on that front, which is very good. Now, not that this will matter necessarily anywhere past the setup, but it is a fairly heavy TV. You can lift it on your own. I mean, I could, but I wouldn't recommend it. If you do have the option to have someone help you set this thing up, then I would recommend that you get them to help you either wall mount it or to get it on its stand. But without endorsement, I did it on my own and it wasn't an issue. The TV actually comes with 2 remotes. It's got a sort of cheap standard Samsung remote that you get with all Samsung TVs, but it also has this nicer, slightly simpler Samsung remote that comes with the sort of higher end TVs. Now this remote is fairly simple. There's not a lot of buttons on it, so if you're looking for something with a lot of shortcuts, you're not really going to be getting that with this remote, but it is useful. It's got a USB-C point so you can charge it, or if you just leave it upside down, it'll actually charge in the sun. It's got a solar panel on the back. And actually that's pretty useful, not having to worry about the remote running out of battery, so nice. All the buttons are in sort of normal places that you'd expect, so it's pretty easy to get used to if you're new to this remote. And things like the volume and channel buttons, they have this nice sort of up and down rocking thing, which you don't get in a lot of remotes, and I quite like that. Now, there is no easy way to get to your settings from this remote, so in order to do that, you're going to have to press the sort of settings number button and then go up into your settings. It's a little bit faffy, and I'll get onto that in a little bit more detail, some of the sort of frustrations of the operating system and how that sort of works. You do have some basic shortcuts for some of the sort of more popular apps at the bottom, so if that's really all you're going to be using, that's nice. There isn't a very obvious shortcut to get to different HDMI inputs though. I will get onto that in a minute. So this TV is running Samsung's Tizen software, which is okay in my personal opinion. It's not the best, it's not the worst. Now, there are a few features of this Tizen software that I do appreciate. I like the fact that it's got picture-in-picture on it, and I like the little game hub that comes on that main menu. Those are actually a couple of really nice touches, and you could do things like cloud gaming straight from your TV without having to have a console, which that's really cool. Funny enough, one of the very few shortcut buttons on the remote is for the picture-in-picture split screen, which, I'll be honest, it's a nice feature to have. I don't really use it that much, so did it warrant having its own button on the remote? Maybe not. Other than that, I found the operating system just wasn't that easy to use. It seemed like if you were trying to navigate anywhere, you were taking the long way round. And things like getting to your HDMI inputs seemed really difficult, and it wasn't obvious. There is a shortcut. If you hold down the settings number button on the remote, you can actually force up the input change, but it wasn't made particularly obvious that that's what you had to do. So I imagine there's probably a lot of people out there that still don't know that, and I only found it by fluke. But again, things like getting to your picture settings and stuff like that, whereas a lot of people might not necessarily be doing that frequently, some people do, and it is just a little bit long to get there. Just feels like you're having to jump through unnecessary hoops. Now, in terms of like the inner power of this TV, especially when you're navigating through the operating system, it can be a bit slow. Normally, once the TV's been up and running for a little while, it seems to be a lot quicker, and you just don't really notice it. But especially when you've first turned on the TV, it seems like trying to get anywhere is just taking a long time. There's just a lot of lag between button presses, and it's a bit frustrating. And ultimately, when you're going to be using this menu, you're normally going to be using it when you first turn on the TV, so that is a little bit annoying. Now, so far the first impressions sort of are a bit hit and miss, but the picture quality, oh my word, this TV looks amazing. And I'll be honest, I am straight on the gravy train with this one. In fact, I'm just drinking the gravy. This is absolutely amazing. This TV is one of the best TVs I think I've ever seen in terms of picture. Now, I will go into a lot more detail in my full review, but for now, just my first impressions, this thing is so bright. Like, I had it initially opposite a window during the day, and I could barely notice the reflections. This space where I've had my LED TVs like my X90J opposite that window, and I can still barely see the TV, but this, I could see it. It was unbelievable. Reflections are barely an issue, so if that's something that bothers you a lot of the time with OLED TVs, this is probably going to be the best option for you. And just the vibrancy in the colours did blow me away. Now, straight out of the box, I would say the colours are designed to make you go, ooh, but they're not really that accurate. You do have a few options to make it more accurate, and again, I'll get into this in a bit more detail in some of my other videos, but you can very easily calibrate it using Samsung's app, which is pretty cool. The most accurate setting to go for was probably filmmaker mode. That seemed to be the one that looked the most real just from eye without the calibration. But again, when I go into my full review, I will go into a bit more detail and get some picture settings that actually are a lot more accurate. Now, I have had a chance to play a game or two, but not really a massive amount, so I am going to need a little bit more time in order to do that. Guys, I am very excited about this TV. There are things that are a bit annoying about it, and there are things that are just absolutely fantastic about it. So we'll get into that in some of my next videos. So guys, do subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Whoop!